Hey everybody, Dan here with Pain Free You. Today's topic is going to be, is chronic Lyme disease TMS? So, we'll get to that in a minute. Got some cicadas in the background. Gonna breathe in the fresh air. Exhale the indoor air. Been inside all day. Need to get out more. Breathe in the peace. Exhale the chaos. Breathe in the calm. Exhale the stress. So chronic Lyme. In this TMS mind-body community, this topic comes up a lot. And there's a lot of people that have symptoms of chronic Lyme disease. And it can be a scary thing. You know, the bacteria from the Lyme, from the tick, gets in the body and can start affecting us and create all sorts of symptoms. And there are some people who get drastically ill. There's actually another gentleman who's fairly popular on the internet. And I won't mention him by name, but he is really, really, really struggling. Brain fog, fatigue, pain, really horrible, bedridden, can't do much. And his diagnosis is chronic Lyme disease. And he describes this visual image of the bacteria just crawling throughout his body, and very horrific, scary stuff. And I don't mean to trigger anybody with that, and I'm not going to go deeper into some of the things he has shared publicly about his challenges. So it got me really thinking about Lyme disease and chronic Lyme disease, and the symptoms that Lyme disease tends to have are also, they just happen to be very common symptoms of this thing called TMS, the mind-body syndrome. And so, if your brain has been convinced that you've got bacteria that is infecting your body and your brain and your joints and everything else, how do you think the body, the brain, and the nervous system is going to react? With fear, terror, and symptoms. And you've probably heard me say that chronic symptoms have been learned by the brain and the nervous system, and fear and attention are what make them chronic or wired neuroplastic-wise. And it is very, very possible that the fear and the attention given to the symptoms from a true, legitimate infection from a Lyme-infected tick can cause symptoms. But the fear of this thing called chronic Lyme can absolutely teach the brain and the nervous system to keep it going. Now, to be very clear, I am not a medical doctor. I'm not a scientist. I don't have laboratories, and I don't study, blood tests and, all sorts of scientific ways of looking at this. But I'm just observing based on what I'm seeing out in the community. And one thing that really kind of struck me was in one of my group sessions, somebody said, I'm in the veterinary medicine world. So basically they treat pets for all sorts of things, one of which is tick bites and Lyme disease. And what this person said, which really struck me, was that in veterinary health, chronic Lyme disease does not exist. A dog may get bit, get infected, start to have some symptoms. They treat with antibiotics, depending upon the infection, maybe, heavier duty antibiotics. But in all cases, the antibiotics take care of the bacteria and the animal recovers. So what's the difference between an animal recovering quickly and a human being not? Well, it's that whole concept of fear and attention and worry and anxiety about the Lyme disease in the first place, the infection in the first place, and the worry that it won't be handled by the antibiotics, and so the symptoms persist, even though the bacteria was most likely dealt with in the first round or two of antibiotics. And so, is chronic Lyme mind-body? Is it TMS? I believe it is. Any type of persistent symptoms that last longer than a true injury has healed or a true infection was resolved through the use of antibiotics, if symptoms persist beyond that, there's a mind-body component to it, and those symptoms have become learned by the brain. The fear and the attention keep them persistent and keep them going, and we can end up with symptoms that as the fear increases and the despair increases and the medicines and the antibiotics don't work and the illness and the feelings and the brain fog and the fatigue and the joint pain and everything else gets worse and worse and worse, we become more full of fear and despair, and as a result the brain becomes more highly vigilant and the nervous system just keeps on ratcheting up and up and up to the point where eventually these people are feeling destroyed by this chronic Lyme disease. And I'm not blaming anybody. If you are watching this and you say, I've got chronic Lyme, I'm not saying this is your fault. I'm not saying it is something you did to yourself. It is where you ended up. So with all the compassion in the world, I am suggesting to you that perhaps the antibiotics worked and the bacteria is gone, and the fear and the worry and the research and the misinformation about this thing called chronic Lyme, which does not exist in the animal health world, the veterinary health world, that fear, anxiety, worry, and this prognosis of, oh my God, if I end up with chronic Lyme, my life's over and this is going to devastate me. It's that fear that creates the symptoms and can even make them worse. So if that's you, I feel for you. I'm not dismissing any of this as imaginary or make-believe or all in your head. No, that's not what I'm saying. Those symptoms are real. You are feeling them in your body. But it is possible that those symptoms have become learned by your brain and your nervous system, and they persist even though the Lyme infection has long ago been dealt with. So, again, all chronic symptoms, including pain, in my opinion, are learned by the brain. Fear and attention are what causes the brain to wire them, connect those neural connections. And if you want to get yourself out of it, the solution is to have accurate knowledge. If the tests are coming up and the doctors say there's no more Lyme and you're saying, but it has to be because I still feel awful, trust the bacterial test results. Because if they're saying there's no more bacteria, or if there is, it's not enough to cause these symptoms, believe the doctor. If the doctor is unconcerned by it, it's now time for you to accept that and start to convince your own brain that, okay, maybe I am just in a state of super high sensitivity and high vigilance by the brain, and these symptoms have become learned by my nervous system and body. They're real, they're not imaginary. You're not crazy. I'm not calling you that. But it is very possible that just a highly sensitive, freaked out brain and nervous system is persisting and even making worse these symptoms, that the infection was long ago resolved. That is my personal belief. Again, I am not a doctor or scientist. I am not even what I would call a Lyme expert. I am not. I'm a regular guy who's been studying the connection between the mind and symptoms and how the brain works and how symptoms can become learned in neuroplasticity and chronic pain. Particularly, that's my area that I've spent the most time looking at. But other symptoms like fatigue and brain fog and dizziness and vertigo and tinnitus and all sorts of stuff. And if it sounds like tinnitus right now, that's those cicadas. They're starting to scream in the trees. But I study all this stuff, and I have been for 24 years. Why? Because it's fascinating. Why? Because I had 13 years worth of chronic pain and sciatica myself. And now I help people get out of these syndromes, these challenges, through accurate information, assessment, helping you figure out what's going on for you, and then a planned approach to teach your brain with this accurate information and assessment and acceptance that this is all that's going on for me, the approach is to teach the brain that you're actually okay. So when you calm the brain down, the nervous system calms down, and guess what happens to the symptoms? They calm down as well. If you want some help, go to painforyou.com, watch the video on the homepage, as well as click on the link that says course/coaching. And I do have a program where I do weekly group coaching calls, and there's an online video-based course. You can get started immediately. This is not a sales pitch to take all chronic Lyme people and say, get into my course. Really, the intent here is to say that bacterial infection from that infected tick has most likely been dealt with long ago. The persistence of symptoms does not mean that the bacteria is running rampant in your body. That does not mean it. Symptoms do not mean illness. Symptoms mean that they have become learned and memorized by the brain and the nervous system, which also means if the brain can learn to keep these symptoms firing, even though the bacterial infections long ago have been dealt with, you can teach the brain to let these symptoms go and turn them off. That's the gold. That's the optimistic view of this. That's the realistic view. And if you are the type of person who was told you had chronic Lyme and you got better as a result of reducing your fear and focus and anxiety and worry about this, please leave a comment, because the other people watching this video could really use some success stories and some hope. Because being told you've got chronic Lyme and they don't know how to treat you because they've already tried however many courses of antibiotics, that's an extremely depressing situation for a lot of people. So if that's you, stick around, read the comments, come back for them. If you've been through this diagnosis of chronic Lyme, excuse me, and you've gotten better, please comment. Tell your story below. Share the hope. Share the possibility. It's possible. It's real. And love you guys and gals. I hope you found this helpful. And even if you don't have chronic Lyme, hopefully you found my examples of how the brain can learn these symptoms useful for whatever you've got going on. So, love you. We'll talk to you tomorrow.